The judge was reviewing his sworn statement claiming she fabricated the pregnancy for financial gain when the courtroom doors swung open. His face contorted in panic as three identical toddlers in matching outfits walked hand in hand with their poised mother toward the witness stand. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the penthouse hallway with its plush carpeting and soft lighting. Imani Jackson tightened her grip on her purse, feeling the plastic pregnancy test tucked safely inside, its positive result both terrifying and exhilarating. Her heart pounded as she approached the door to Nathan Reynolds' Lakeshore Drive apartment, an exclusive address that, despite their 2-year relationship, never quite felt like home to her. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, smoothing down her Northwestern Law School sweatshirt, comfortable clothes for what she hoped would be a night of celebration and planning. She used her key, a privilege Nathan had granted reluctantly 6 months into their relationship. "Let's keep this between us," he'd said when giving it to her. "My investors are conservative. They're not ready to see a white man with a black woman at the helm." At 29, Nathan Reynolds was already CEO of Reynolds Enterprises, a rising technology company founded with family inheritance and privileged connections. At 24, Imani was in her 2nd year of law school, brilliant and ambitious, but from a world entirely different from Nathan's. When she entered the apartment, the Chicago skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows. Nathan sat at the dining table, his attention fixed on his laptop, spreadsheets reflecting in his wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't look up. "Hey," she said, her voice smaller than intended. "Hey," he responded, still typing. "There's some Thai in the fridge if you're hungry." Imani took a deep breath and walked to the table. "Nathan, I need to talk to you about something important." He glanced up briefly, his expression distracted. "Can it wait? I'm finalizing numbers for tomorrow's investor meeting." "No," she said, finding her resolve. "It can't wait." Something in her tone made him pause. He closed his laptop halfway and looked at her properly for the first time. "What's going on?" Imani reached into her purse, removed the pregnancy test and placed it on the table between them. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Nathan stared at the plastic stick, his face unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, incredulous sound that made Imani's stomach tighten. "You're joking, right?" he finally said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "This isn't funny, Imani." "I'm not joking," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I took 3 tests. They're all positive." Nathan's expression transformed then, the bemused smile fading into something cold and unfamiliar, a mask she'd never seen before. "This wasn't in the plans. It wasn't in my plans either, Nathan, but it happened and—" "No," he interrupted sharply, standing up. "It can't happen. Not now. I'm about to close a $50 million deal with investors from Texas." He paced to the window, then turned back to her, his silhouette framed against the city lights. "A black child? A black girlfriend? Do you have any idea what that would do to my corporate image?" The words hit Imani like a physical blow. She'd always known their relationship was a secret, but hearing him articulate exactly why was devastating. "I thought," she began, but couldn't finish. What had she thought? That he would eventually introduce her to his family? That the secrecy was temporary? Nathan walked briskly to his home office and returned moments later with a checkbook. He sat down, uncapped a pen, and began writing. "I know a discreet doctor. Take care of it." He tore out the check, $10,000, and pushed it across the table. Imani stared at the check, tears welling despite her determination to remain composed. "I'm not asking for your money," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm sharing news about our child." "My child?" Nathan's laugh was harsh now. "No, Imani, you'll never be enough for the world I've built. My family has expectations. My investors have expectations." He leaned back, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. "You were fun. A phase. This baby will be your burden, not mine." Imani felt something shift inside her, a hardening like steel being tempered. She straightened her spine and met his gaze. "I see." Nathan tossed the check onto the coffee table and picked up his phone. "Security? This is Nathan Reynolds in 5001. I need an escort for Ms. Jackson. She's leaving." He paused, listening. "Yes, now, thank you." "You're calling security on me?" Imani asked, incredulous. "I'm ensuring you leave without a scene," he replied coolly. "I think we're done here." Minutes later, a security guard, professional and apologetic, stood in the doorway. Nathan gathered Imani's few belongings from the bedroom and handed them to her in a shopping bag. "If you try anything," he said quietly as she passed him, "I have the best lawyers in Chicago. You haven't even finished law school yet. Don't test me." The elevator ride down was a blur, the security guard maintaining a respectful distance. Outside, the January wind cut through Imani's thin jacket, but she barely felt it. Numbness had settled over her like a protective shield. In her tiny Englewood apartment, a world away from Lakeshore Drive, she sat on her second-hand couch, still clutching the shopping bag. The check remained in her purse, untouched. She could barely afford this apartment on her part-time legal assistant salary, and the thought of adding a baby's expenses was overwhelming. But something in her refused to use Nathan's money, refused to validate his attempt to erase their child. 3 days later, alone in her apartment, Imani watched NBC Chicago announce the engagement of Nathan Reynolds to Catherine Sinclair, daughter of Senator Robert Sinclair. The reporter gushed about America's golden couple and how Catherine would be the perfect partner for the image of the expanding company. Imani turned off the TV, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. She had tried calling Nathan twice, only to discover he had blocked her number. That morning, she'd received a legal notice warning her against any contact attempts. The following week brought another shock. At her first prenatal appointment, the ultrasound technician's eyes widened. "Ms. Jackson," she said carefully, "I'm seeing multiple heartbeats here, 3 to be precise. You're carrying identical triplets." Sitting in the sterile exam room, paper gown crinkling beneath her, Imani began to cry, not from despair, but from fierce determination. Triplets. 3 babies who would need everything she could give them and more. The months that followed tested her beyond anything she could have imagined. Rejected by Nathan, who had effectively erased her from his life, Imani fought to survive. She reluctantly took a leave of absence from law school, picked up a second job, receptionist by day, data entry clerk by night, and worked until her 8th month when her doctor insisted she stop. Her mother, a retired nurse with limited resources, moved from Michigan to help. Together, they transformed the tiny apartment into a home for the coming babies. Every penny went to diapers, formula, and an emergency fund. On September 5, 2013, Malcolm, Martin, and Marcus Jackson were born, 3 identical boys with bright, curious eyes. Holding them for the first time, surrounded by second-hand baby equipment and walls freshly painted with donated paint, Imani made a promise. "You will never know the rejection I knew," she whispered to each perfect face. "I will build a world where you know you are more than enough. And someday, we'll show him exactly what he missed." With the triplets just 2 months old, Imani returned to law school, sometimes bringing the babies to class when childcare fell through. Understanding professors allowed her to nurse discreetly in the back of the room while taking notes. Classmates took turns helping with the babies during breaks. At night, she studied while the boys slept, often falling asleep on her law books from exhaustion. During a second-year internship, she developed a digital security system to protect confidential legal documents, a solution so elegant that the law firm filed the patent in her name as a bonus. That patent would be the seed of what was to come. At her graduation, with the 3-year-old triplets wearing tiny suits and bow ties, Imani Jackson was the class speaker and received offers from 5 major firms. Instead, she leveraged her digital security patent and a $50,000 loan guaranteed by a professor who believed in her to found Obsidian Security Solutions. As she tucked the diplomas into a drawer, she looked at the photo of the 3 boys and whispered, "He said we weren't enough. We're going to show him exactly how much we're worth." While filing away the torn check in a drawer as a reminder, Imani couldn't have imagined that 10 years later she would be at the helm of a billion-dollar company, facing the man who had said she would never be enough. The torn check remained in Imani's drawer as a reminder of the day she learned exactly where she stood in Nathan Reynolds' world. Now, sitting in her tiny Englewood apartment, she pressed a hand against her growing belly, still processing the ultrasound technician's words. Identical triplets. The statistical improbability made her laugh. She had never won so much as a raffle, yet here she was, beating odds of 1 in 200,000. Morning sickness hit her in waves that felt more like tsunamis. Imani leaned over the bathroom sink, retching until nothing remained but bitter bile. These weren't ordinary pregnancy symptoms. They were amplified threefold, her body working overtime to sustain 3 tiny lives. "You okay in there, baby?" her mother's voice called through the door. "Fine, Mom," she managed, splashing cold water on her face. Not fine, terrified, but admitting that wouldn't change anything. Later that morning, Imani sat at her kitchen table, really just a folding card table with mismatched chairs, calculating her budget for the 10th time that week. Rent, $650. Utilities, roughly $100. Food, stretching $200 monthly. The numbers never balanced, especially when she added the column for baby essentials. "We need to be realistic," her mother said, setting down a cup of ginger tea. Gloria Jackson had arrived from Detroit 3 days after Imani called with the news, carrying 2 suitcases and a lifetime of nursing experience. At 62, she should have been enjoying retirement. Instead, she was preparing to help raise triplets in a 1-bedroom apartment. "I've been looking at cribs," Imani said, showing her mother listings on her laptop. "Even second-hand. They're $100 each. And we need 3. Gloria squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "We'll manage, always have." The next evening, Imani sat at her data entry job, fingers flying across the keyboard, entering legal documents into a database. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen for 8 hours after her day job as a receptionist. Her back ached, her ankles were swollen, and she was only 16 weeks along. How would she manage at 30 weeks? At 35? She entered the last document and checked the time. Midnight. Another 6-hour shift completed. The night supervisor nodded as she gathered her things. He never questioned why a pregnant law student was working 2 jobs. He didn't need to. At home, Imani found her mother had painted one wall of the bedroom a soft yellow. "I got it from the hardware store's mistake section," Gloria explained. $5 for the gallon. Together, they stood in the quiet room, imagining it filled with 3 cribs, 3 babies, 3 of everything. Imani's law books were already stacked in the living room, making space for what was to come. "Nathan would have bought designer cribs," Imani said softly, "probably imported from Italy. And they wouldn't hold those babies any better than the ones we'll find," Gloria replied firmly. The following week, Imani found 3 matching cribs at a church donation center. Sturdy, if slightly worn. $60 for all 3. A miracle, the volunteer called it, that they had 3 identical ones. Imani silently agreed, though lately she was questioning what qualified as divine intervention. By her 7th month, Imani's small frame was stretched to its limit. Her navel had long since protruded, her skin marked with angry red stretch marks. Walking the 4 blocks from the bus stop to work became increasingly difficult. "You need to take it easier," her co-worker Janine advised, watching Imani lower herself painfully into her reception desk chair. "You're carrying 3 babies." "I'm aware," Imani replied dryly, shifting to find a comfortable position. "But they need health insurance, and I need this job." That afternoon, while transferring a call, Imani's vision blurred suddenly. The room tilted, voices became distant, and then darkness. She awoke to paramedics hovering over her, concerned faces swimming in her vision. "Blood pressure's too high," one was saying, "possible preeclampsia." At the hospital, Dr. Winters spoke plainly. "Your body is under extreme stress, Ms. Jackson. Multiple pregnancies are high risk even under ideal circumstances. You're working too hard." "I don't have a choice," Imani argued, IV fluids dripping into her arm. "You do," the doctor countered. "Choose your babies, choose yourself, or risk losing everything." The decision was excruciating. Imani's jobs weren't just income, they were security, independence, a future. But as she lay in the hospital bed feeling the triplets move within her, she recognized the fragility of her situation. She called her supervisors from the hospital room and resigned from both positions. The following weeks were a blur of medical appointments and financial panic. With no income, Imani faced the humiliation of applying for government assistance, SNAP benefits for food, emergency Medicaid for prenatal care, temporary housing assistance to ensure they wouldn't be evicted. "Your name?" asked the intake worker at the Department of Human Services, not looking up from her computer. "Imani Jackson." "Occupation?" Imani hesitated. "Law student, currently on medical leave." The woman looked up then, skepticism evident in her expression. "Law student? But you're applying for—" "Yes," Imani interrupted, one hand on her enormous belly. Circumstances change. Walking out with a stack of forms and an EBT card, Imani felt the weight of judgment from other waiting applicants. The silent questions: "Why have children you can't afford? Why not give them up? What were you thinking?" Questions she sometimes asked herself at 3 a.m., when sleep evaded her and fear took hold. At 34 weeks, Imani's water broke during a routine checkup. "It's time," Dr. Winters said calmly, watching the monitor showing contractions already beginning. "We're taking you to delivery." "But it's too early," Imani protested, panic rising. "They need more time. They've had all the time they can get. Now we need to meet them." The delivery room was a flurry of activity, 3 pediatric teams standing by, equipment for premature infants ready. Gloria held Imani's hand, whispering encouragement as contractions intensified. "I can't do this," Imani gasped between waves of pain. "You already are," her mother replied. "You've been doing the impossible for months." 16 hours later, Malcolm entered the world first. 4 pounds, 6 ounces of determined life, announcing himself with a surprisingly strong cry. Martin followed 7 minutes later, slightly smaller but equally vocal. Marcus arrived last, the smallest at barely 4 pounds, his cry more of a whisper. They were immediately placed in incubators, tiny bodies connected to monitors and tubes. Imani, exhausted beyond comprehension, could only glimpse them before they were whisked to the NICU. Hours later, wheeled to the neonatal intensive care unit, Imani faced the reality of her sons, so small, so vulnerable, so completely dependent on her. Through the incubator openings, she touched each one with a gentle finger. "Malcolm," she whispered to the first, "you are never a burden. You are my strength." To the second, "Martin, you are more than enough. You are extraordinary." And finally, to the smallest, "Marcus, I will build a world worthy of you. This I promise." 2 weeks later, the triplets were strong enough to go home. The apartment had been transformed in their absence. Gloria had organized a network of church members and former nursing colleagues to donate essential items. 3 car seats, mountains of diapers, formula, in case breastfeeding 3 proved impossible, and a rocking chair squeezed into the bedroom corner. The first night home, Imani sat in that chair, attempting to nurse 2 babies while the third waited his turn, crying. Gloria paced the small room, bouncing Marcus gently. "How am I going to do this?" Imani asked, tears mixing with breast milk. "One day at a time," Gloria answered. "One baby at a time, one breath at a time." Days blurred into nights. Feedings every 2 hours meant Imani rarely slept more than 90 minutes consecutively. She learned to nurse 2 babies simultaneously while reading law textbooks propped on a pillow. Gloria took night shifts when possible, but at 62, her energy had limits. During rare quiet moments, Imani drafted emails to Northwestern Law School, inquiring about part-time options, online courses, anything that might allow her to continue her education while raising triplets. The response was cautiously optimistic. They would work with her, though no one had quite attempted this particular juggling act before. "I need to go back," Imani told her mother, watching the 3-month-old babies sleeping in their cribs, arranged in a tight triangle to fit the small bedroom. "Not just for me, but for them. They deserve a mother who finishes what she starts." "And they'll have one," Gloria assured her. "Just be realistic about timing." At 6 months, Imani enrolled in 2 online courses, a first step back toward her legal education. She studied during nap time and late at night, submitting assignments while nursing, somehow maintaining a 3.8 GPA despite functioning on minimal sleep. Every morning, she opened her drawer and looked at Nathan's torn check, reminding herself of why she pushed so hard. Not for revenge, but for vindication, to prove that his assessment of her worth was catastrophically wrong. With only $257 in her bank account and 3 infants depending on her, Imani could scarcely imagine that one day her sons would grow up in penthouses and her name would appear on lists of America's most powerful women. $257 wouldn't last long, but Imani Jackson had something far more valuable than money: determination. As January's bitter Chicago wind rattled the windows of her tiny apartment, she gently laid her 2-month-old triplets in their second-hand cribs and opened her laptop. The email from Northwestern Law School glowed on the screen. "We look forward to welcoming you back for the spring semester." "Are you sure about this?" Gloria asked, adjusting Marcus's blanket. "They're still so small." "If I wait until it's easy, I'll never go back," Imani replied, her voice soft but resolute. "Besides, we've worked out the schedule. Morning classes while you're with them, afternoon feeding, evening classes while they nap, study at night." "And sleep when, exactly?" her mother pressed. Imani smiled tiredly. "Sleep is for lawyers, Mom. I'm still just a student." The first day back on campus felt surreal. Imani walked through the grand entrance of Northwestern Law School with 2 bags, one filled with textbooks, the other with diapers, bottles, and extra clothes. Her classmates had spent the break at ski resorts or tropical beaches. She had spent hers learning to nurse 3 babies simultaneously while highlighting case law. Halfway through constitutional law, her phone vibrated. Gloria's text read, "Martin won't settle. Crying for an hour. Need you." Imani slipped out, apologizing to Professor Williams, who nodded sympathetically. In the quiet hallway, she called home, listening to Martin's wails through the speaker. "I've tried everything." Gloria sounded exhausted. "I think he needs his mama." "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Imani promised, already packing her books. That evening, as Martin finally slept against her chest, Imani emailed Professor Williams explaining her situation. His response came within minutes. "Ms. Jackson, my wife and I raise twins. Bring the baby to class tomorrow if needed. Your education shouldn't suffer because you're a mother." The next day, Martin accompanied her to constitutional law, sleeping peacefully in a sling across her chest. When he stirred during a discussion on the 14th Amendment, Professor Williams simply raised his voice slightly and continued. "Gentlemen," he addressed several male students who exchanged uncomfortable glances, "if this disturbs you, I suggest you reconsider your future careers in family law." Not all professors were so understanding. Professor Harrington's scowl was immediate when Malcolm began fussing during criminal procedure the following week. "Ms. Jackson," he interrupted his own lecture, "your maternal status doesn't grant you special privileges. Please step outside until you can return without disruption." Red-faced, Imani gathered her things while Malcolm's cries intensified. Outside in the hallway, she fought back tears of frustration as she paced with the wailing infant. A hand touched her shoulder. Lisa Chen, a quiet classmate, stood holding Imani's forgotten notebook. "I'll take notes for you," she offered. "And I'm free Thursday nights if you ever need help studying." That simple offer became a lifeline. By February, a small group of classmates had formed an informal support network. They created a study group that met at Imani's apartment, bringing takeout and taking turns holding babies while discussing tort law. Some had younger siblings. Others simply enjoyed the break from law school intensity. For Imani, it meant precious hours of collaborative learning that would have been impossible alone. Sleep became a luxury Imani could rarely afford. Most nights followed the same pattern. Babies fed and settled by 11, studying until 2 or 3 in the morning, then precious sleep until the first cry at around 5. She learned to function on 4 disjointed hours, caffeine becoming as essential as air. One night, highlighting cases for property law, Imani's eyes grew impossibly heavy. She adjusted her position on the couch, thinking 5 minutes of rest might help. When she opened her eyes again, morning light streamed through the window, and Gloria stood over her with Marcus in arms. "You were so deep asleep I couldn't bear to wake you," her mother said. "I handled the 4 a.m. feeding." Imani bolted upright. "My property brief is due at 9. The next 45 minutes were a blur of typing, nursing Malcolm simultaneously, and gulping lukewarm coffee. She submitted the brief 3 minutes before deadline, then collapsed back onto the couch. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, eyes closed. "Then don't," Gloria replied simply. "No one would blame you for taking more time off." Imani's eyes snapped open. "That's not an option." The spring semester became summer. Summer became fall. The triplets grew from fragile newborns to chunky babies with distinct personalities. Malcolm, the observer, watching everything with intense focus. Martin, vocal and demanding, always the first to cry and last to settle. Marcus, the peacekeeper, content to play alone but reaching for his brothers when they were near. By their first birthday, Imani had completed another full semester with a 3.7 GPA, slightly lower than her pre-motherhood average, but miraculous given the circumstances. More importantly, she'd secured a coveted internship at Goldstein & Palmer, a prestigious firm specializing in corporate law. The interview had been a test of confidence. When asked about the 7-month gap in her resume, Imani had looked the senior partner directly in the eyes. "I generated 3 lives and maintained my legal studies. I call that extreme time management." Her internship at Goldstein & Palmer introduced her to the world of corporate security issues. During her second week, while organizing case files, Imani noticed how vulnerable the firm's document storage system was. Anyone with basic access could potentially view confidential information across cases. "Has anyone considered encryption by client rather than by case?" she asked the IT manager during a training session. He blinked at her. "That would require complete system reorganization. But it would prevent cross-contamination of confidential information," she persisted. "What if a single employee could only access files for clients they're directly working with?" Night after night, while the triplets slept, Imani sketched ideas for a more secure document management system. She built flowcharts, researched encryption methods, and created a prototype using free software tools. When Martin woke crying at 2 a.m., she would nurse him while typing one-handed, determination outweighing exhaustion. 3 weeks later, she requested a meeting with Jacob Goldstein, the founding partner. Nervous but prepared, she presented her security solution. "This system prevents 99% of conventional data breaches," she explained, clicking through her presentation. "It uses client-specific encryption keys and multi-factor authentication tied to user roles." The room fell silent when she finished. Jacob Goldstein removed his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully. "Ms. Jackson," he finally said, "how long have you been developing this?" "About 3 weeks, sir, mostly between midnight and 3 a.m. He laughed, genuinely surprised. while raising triplets and attending law school full-time? Yes, sir. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it. He closed her folder. We want to patent this system, Ms. Jackson, in your name. The firm will handle the filing costs, and you'll retain ownership with a licensing agreement for our use. The patent certificate arrived 6 months later, framed by the firm as a gift. Imani hung it in the living room of the slightly larger apartment they'd been able to afford after her internship converted to a paid position. By the triplets' 3rd birthday, Imani was preparing for her final year of law school. The boys wore tiny suits with colorful bow ties to her class speaker election, sitting remarkably well-behaved in the auditorium as she accepted the honor. "Mama talk!" Marcus called out, clapping enthusiastically as she took the podium for a brief acceptance speech. Graduation day arrived in a flurry of black gowns and spring flowers. Imani, sleep-deprived from final exams but radiating pride, accepted her diploma while the triplets watched from Gloria's lap, now active 3-year-olds barely contained by their matching outfits. "Jackson, Imani," the dean announced, graduating with honors. As she moved the tassel on her cap, 5 envelopes waited in her bag, job offers from top firms who had observed her remarkable journey and recognized her exceptional abilities despite, or perhaps because of, the challenges she'd overcome. That evening, after the triplets were finally asleep, Imani sat at her small kitchen table examining the framed patent certificate. Her security system design had garnered attention beyond Goldstein and Palmer, with several firms inquiring about licensing. An idea began to form, audacious, perhaps impossible, but compelling. Instead of joining an established firm, what if she leveraged her patent to create something new, something entirely hers? She looked at the photograph of her 3 sleeping boys, then at the torn check still preserved in its frame as a reminder. "He said we weren't enough," she whispered. "Let's show him exactly what we're worth." While recruiters from the biggest law firms awaited her answer, Imani was already visualizing the Obsidian Security Solutions logo atop a Chicago skyscraper, not knowing that in just 7 years, her vision would become reality. While recruiters from prestigious law firms left increasingly urgent voicemails, Imani stared at the patent certificate hanging on her wall. The elegant calligraphy declaring her the inventor of a revolutionary digital security protocol seemed to whisper possibilities she'd never dared consider before motherhood. "What if," she murmured, the triplets sleeping soundly in the next room after their 3rd birthday celebration. Her mother had gone to bed hours ago, leaving Imani alone with her thoughts and a half-empty cup of cold coffee. In May of 2016, Imani signed the lease on a tiny office space in a weathered building on Chicago's South Side. The rent was manageable, barely, and the location far from the gleaming downtown towers where her classmates were beginning their legal careers. But it was hers. "What do you think, boys?" she asked as Malcolm, Martin, and Marcus explored the empty room, their identical faces curious as they peered out the single window. "Echo!" Marcus called, delighted when his voice bounced off the bare walls. "Can we bring toys?" Martin asked practically. Malcolm, always the observer, walked the perimeter of the space, running his small hand along the wall. "It needs computers, Mama." Imani laughed. "Yes, it certainly does." Professor Diana Wright, who had mentored Imani through her final year of law school, stood in the doorway watching the scene. "Well, it's not exactly the corner office Kirkland and Ellis offered you." "No," Imani agreed, "but those aren't my initials on the door." Diana nodded, understanding perfectly. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew an envelope. "Which is why I brought this. $50,000. A business loan." Imani's eyes widened. "Diana, I can't." "You can and you will. I'm investing in Obsidian Security Solutions. I expect a reasonable return, nothing more." Her expression softened. "Though watching you prove every doubter wrong will be satisfaction enough." That night, after setting up a folding table and her laptop in the empty office, Imani worked until dawn designing the company website. She fell asleep at the keyboard, her head dropping onto her arms as exhaustion finally overcame determination. A small hand on her shoulder woke her. "Mama, you need to rest," Malcolm said, his serious little face inches from hers. Gloria stood in the doorway with the other boys, concern etched on her face. "I brought breakfast," her mother said, holding up a bag of muffins. "And reinforcements." She nodded toward the triplets. "They insisted on helping you work today." For the next month, Imani divided her time between coding her security platform and cold calling potential clients. The rejections were relentless and often humiliating. "Obsidian Security? Never heard of it," said one office manager before hanging up. "We work with established firms," another replied dismissively. The worst was her meeting with Stanley Kowalski, IT director for a mid-sized insurance company. He glanced at her business card, then around the small conference room she'd rented for the pitch. "And who's the technical director? Who's the real brain behind this?" Imani maintained her professional smile. "I am the brain, Mr. Kowalski. The patent is in my name." He leaned back, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "Look, Ms. Jackson, security is serious business. Our clients trust us with sensitive information. We need established partners with proven track records. Everyone starts somewhere, Mr. Kowalski. My system is more advanced than what you're currently using. I've analyzed your public-facing infrastructure and found 3 significant vulnerabilities." His expression soured. "We'll pass, but thanks for the free consultation." He rose, ending the meeting 20 minutes early. In the elevator down, Imani fought back tears of frustration. These meetings depleted her limited startup funds and precious time away from the triplets. Diana's loan was dwindling fast, mostly consumed by equipment, licensing fees, and childcare during meetings. June became July, July became August. Imani lost count of the rejections. Meanwhile, she watched competitors with inferior solutions, many run by men with fewer qualifications but more connections, win contracts she'd been denied. Then came the call that changed everything. "Is this Obsidian Security? The Chicago Community Bank has experienced a data breach. Your name was mentioned as someone who might help. We've tried 3 larger firms, but they can't deploy teams until next week." Imani straightened in her chair. "I can be there in an hour." The bank's systems had been compromised through a sophisticated phishing attack, potentially exposing thousands of customers' financial information. With the clock ticking on notification requirements and reputation damage mounting by the hour, the bank's president looked skeptically at Imani when she arrived. "You're Obsidian Security? Just you?" "For now," Imani replied confidently, already unpacking her laptop. "Show me where your system administrators work." For the next 72 hours, Imani barely left the bank's IT department. She traced the breach, isolated compromised accounts, implemented containment protocols, and designed a security patch, all while stepping out periodically to call home and check on the triplets. On the 3rd day, bleary-eyed but triumphant, she presented her findings to the bank's board. "The breach has been contained. All affected customers have been identified, and I've implemented enhanced security protocols to prevent similar attacks." The board president looked stunned. 3 other firms told us this would take weeks. They would have used conventional approaches. I didn't have that luxury, so I created a more efficient solution. She handed him an invoice, substantially lower than competitor quotes, but still the largest sum Obsidian had ever charged. He signed it without hesitation. The following week, the Chicago Business Journal ran a small article. "Startup security firm saves community bank from cyber disaster." The phone began ringing more frequently. As Obsidian slowly gained traction, the triplets continued developing their remarkable abilities. At 5 years old, they were reading at a 3rd grade level, with Malcolm showing particular aptitude for mathematics and programming. "We'd like to evaluate your sons for our gifted program," said the administrator at Lakeside Academy, one of Chicago's most prestigious private schools. "Their preschool teacher sent us some remarkable work samples." The evaluation confirmed what Imani already knew. Her boys were exceptional. All three qualified for Lakeside's program for gifted children, with full academic scholarships. But the peripheral costs, uniforms, supplies, transportation, would strain Obsidian's fragile finances. That night, Imani calculated and recalculated her budget at the kitchen table. The choice seemed impossible. Hire the programmer she desperately needed to expand Obsidian, or provide her children with an education that would nurture their extraordinary potential. "Why so serious, Mama?" Malcolm asked, climbing onto her lap and studying her spreadsheet. "Just figuring out how to make everything work, sweetheart." He pointed to a line of numbers. "These don't add up right." Imani checked his correction and laughed. He was right. She'd made a simple arithmetic error that had thrown off her calculations. The solution came to her that night: transform part of her office into an after-school study space for the boys. They could come directly to Obsidian after Lakeside, completing homework while she worked. The arrangement would save childcare costs and allow her to supervise their education personally. As fall turned to winter, Obsidian gained its first full-time employee, Zoe Chen, a brilliant programmer who had received offers from Google and Microsoft but chose Obsidian instead. "Those places are full of guys who think like each other," she told Imani during her interview. "I'd rather help build something new with someone who thinks differently." 5-year-old Malcolm, sitting quietly in the makeshift study corner, looked up from his tablet. "Mama, I think there's a problem with your encryption algorithm. This line is causing the delay." Imani and Zoe exchanged glances, then examined his screen. He had identified a legitimate issue in Obsidian's code, one that had been puzzling them for days. "He's right," Zoe whispered, amazed. On a snowy December evening, as Imani worked late finalizing a security proposal, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Midwest Credit Union, a regional financial institution she'd been courting for months. "Ms. Jackson, we were impressed by your work with Chicago Community Bank. We have a contract to discuss. Are you available for a meeting tomorrow?" The following week, Imani gathered her tiny team, Zoe, the Triplets, and Gloria, around a simple chocolate cake with "Congratulations, Obsidian" written in blue icing. The Midwest Credit Union contract, worth $120,000, represented not just financial salvation but validation. "To new beginnings," Imani said, cutting slices for everyone. As they celebrated, she couldn't know that in just 5 years, Obsidian would be valued in the billions, or that Nathan Reynolds would be watching her rise with growing discomfort from his increasingly less relevant office. As the Midwest Credit Union contract ink dried, a metaphorical door swung open for Obsidian Security Solutions. The 6-figure agreement, modest by industry standards but monumental for a fledgling startup, provided the oxygen Imani's vision desperately needed. By early 2018, Obsidian had outgrown its modest first office. Imani stood in the center of their new space, still in the same building but 3 times larger, watching as her team of 15 employees arranged workstations and unpacked equipment. The steady hum of conversation filled the room with purpose. "Team meeting in 5 minutes, she announced, straightening her blazer, a department store purchase on sale, but professional enough for client meetings. Unlike her law school classmates at major firms who already wore designer labels, Imani reinvested nearly every dollar back into Obsidian, prioritizing growth over appearance. The contrast between Obsidian's culture and traditional corporate environments became starkly apparent during client meetings downtown. During one such meeting at Meridian Financial, Imani noticed the subtle double takes when she introduced herself as CEO, the skeptical glances exchanged between executives, the slightly condescending tone when technical questions were directed to Jamal, her male project manager, rather than to her. "Actually," she would interject smoothly, "I developed the encryption protocol we're discussing. I'd be happy to explain the technical specifications." These small assertions of authority became routine, as did proving her competence repeatedly in spaces where it would have been automatically assumed for others. Back at Obsidian's offices, Imani implemented workplace policies that reflected her values and experiences. The former break room had been transformed into a bright, cheerful space where employees could bring children when childcare arrangements fell through. A programmer worked at a standing desk while his 4-year-old daughter colored quietly nearby. Another analyst reviewed code with her infant sleeping in a carrier on her chest. "This is highly irregular," commented Charles Bennett, the newly hired financial director, watching the scene with raised eyebrows. "So is expecting professionals to pretend they don't have families," Imani replied. "We hire people, Charles, not disembodied brains. Their full humanity comes with them to work, including their responsibilities as parents." The investment in her team's well-being paid dividends in loyalty and productivity. While competitors struggled with turnover rates exceeding 30%, Obsidian's remained below 5%. The company attracted talented individuals often overlooked by traditional firms, like Jamal Washington. "Your resume is impressive," Imani said during his interview, "but there's a 2-year gap here." Jamal's shoulders tensed. "I was incarcerated. Juvenile offense that should have been sealed but follows me everywhere." He started gathering his papers, clearly expecting the interview to end. "That wasn't a rejection," Imani clarified. "I'm curious about what you learned during that time." He looked up, surprised. "How to code. The facility had a basic computer lab. I taught myself JavaScript, then Python. By the time I got out, I could build websites better than most professionals." Imani nodded. "Second chances aren't charity, they're strategy. People with something to prove work harder." Charles argued against the hire later. "He's a security risk in a security company." "He made a mistake at 16, Imani countered. "He's paid his debt, and his technical skills are exceptional. We're hiring him." The Triplets, now 7, thrived at Lakeside Academy. Each afternoon, the school bus dropped them at Obsidian's building, where they headed straight to the designated study area Imani had created. Though identical in appearance, their diverging interests became increasingly apparent. Malcolm gravitated toward the programming department, observing coding sessions with intense focus. Martin often charmed international clients, surprising everyone by conversing in fluent Mandarin with a Chinese investor. Marcus spent hours in the small hardware lab Obsidian had established, fascinated by the physical components of security systems. Tech Forward magazine featured Obsidian in a profile titled "The Quiet Revolution: How Obsidian is Redefining Corporate Culture." The article highlighted Imani's unconventional leadership approach and the company's remarkable diversity. 60% women and 70% people of color, statistics unheard of in the technology sector. The exposure brought both opportunity and scrutiny. Larger competitors began monitoring Obsidian more closely, occasionally attempting to poach key employees with inflated salary offers. Imani countered not with matching compensation, but with equity shares and work-life balance that larger firms couldn't match. At Lakeside Academy's parent presentation night, Imani sat in the auditorium wearing her best dress, still off the rack but carefully tailored to fit her petite frame. Gloria sat beside her, beaming with pride as Malcolm took the stage. "Today I'll demonstrate an encryption algorithm I developed," Malcolm announced confidently to the assembled parents and teachers. At 7 years old, he stood on a step stool to reach the microphone, yet spoke with the clarity of someone much older. The audience watched in astonishment as he explained concepts many adults struggled to grasp, illustrating his points with simple analogies that made complex cryptography accessible. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. "Your son is extraordinary," whispered a father sitting nearby, the CEO of a marketing firm. "All 3 of them are. You must be incredibly proud." "I am," Imani replied simply, watching as Martin and Marcus joined their brother on stage for questions. That summer, an opportunity arose that would transform Obsidian's trajectory. Threat Analytics, a small startup specializing in predictive security threats, approached Imani about a potential acquisition. Their technology complemented Obsidian's perfectly, but their founders wanted to move on to other ventures. "This would be our first acquisition," Imani explained to the Triplets that evening in their apartment, which, though larger than their first home, remained modest by Chicago standards. It means Obsidian would grow bigger, but also take on more responsibility. "Like adoption?" asked Marcus thoughtfully. Imani smiled. "That's a good analogy. We'd be adopting their technology and their clients." "Will it cost a lot of money?" Malcolm inquired, always practical about finances. "Yes, but it's an investment, like your education at Lakeside." Martin, who had been quietly listening, asked the most insightful question. "Will it make you happy, Mama?" The question gave Imani pause. "I think it will make me proud of what we're building together." The acquisition negotiations lasted 6 weeks, with Imani handling most details personally. The night before the final signing, she barely slept, reviewing documents until dawn, questioning whether she was overreaching. In the morning, fortified by coffee and determination, she signed the papers, making threat analytics part of Obsidian Security Solutions, her first major corporate acquisition. The team celebrated that evening, gathering for pizza and sparkling cider in the office. They had become a family of sorts, bound by shared purpose and mutual respect. With the acquisition successfully completed, Imani finally allowed herself one significant personal upgrade: a spacious 3-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood with good lighting for the boys to study. Though still modest compared to what the company could now afford, it represented progress, tangible evidence of their journey. She converted one bedroom into a home office, allowing her to work while supervising the triplets' increasingly advanced studies. Often, she would look up from her computer to find Malcolm debugging code, Martin translating a French novel, and Marcus sketching engineering designs, each lost in their unique passions yet connected by the secure environment she had created. In September 2018, a Forbes reporter reached out to Imani. "We're doing a feature on emerging security firms, and Obsidian keeps coming up in our research. Would you be available for an interview for our Companies to Watch series?" Imani accepted, scheduling the interview for the following week. As she prepared, selecting her most professional outfit and rehearsing answers to anticipated questions, she couldn't have known the significance of this seemingly routine media opportunity. What had begun as a struggle for survival was transforming into an empire. And as Imani prepared for her first national interview, Nathan Reynolds casually flipped through Forbes magazine, unaware that the name soon to leap from its pages would be that of the woman he had dismissed as insufficient. Nathan Reynolds absently flipped through the latest Forbes magazine in his corner office, scanning articles about market disruptions and emerging technologies. His attention snagged on a headline near the back pages: "Security Startups to Watch." He nearly turned the page when a name stopped him cold: Imani Jackson, founder and CEO of Obsidian Security Solutions. The photo showed a woman he barely recognized, poised, confident, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, standing before a sleek office backdrop. Gone was the law student in worn jeans who had once shared his bed. This woman looked like she belonged in the boardrooms he frequented. 3 identical young boys stood beside her, their resemblance to him unmistakable to anyone who knew where to look. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips as he read about Obsidian's revolutionary approach to digital security and its meteoric rise under Jackson's leadership. The article mentioned her background: Northwestern Law Honors graduate, single mother of triplets, but nothing about him. He was completely absent from her success story. Across town, Imani's phone hadn't stopped ringing since the Forbes profile hit newsstands. The modest feature, originally slated for the magazine's middle section, had been moved to a more prominent position after the editor was impressed during his interview with her. "Obsidian Security? How may I direct your call?" Her new receptionist sounded overwhelmed. "Yes, another venture capital inquiry. I'll add it to the list." Imani glanced at the growing stack of messages on her desk. The Forbes exposure had created a frenzy of interest, investors eager to get in early on what they suddenly recognized as a rising star, potential clients who previously wouldn't return her calls, even television programs requesting interviews. "Ms. Jackson, Morgan Stanley is online too. Their chief security officer wants to discuss implementing Obsidian protocols across their network. The opportunity was exactly what Obsidian needed, but Imani knew rapid growth required careful navigation. The following morning, she convened a meeting with potential investors in Obsidian's conference room, still modest by corporate standards but professionally appointed. "We appreciate your interest," Imani stated calmly to the three venture capitalists seated across from her. "However, I need to be clear about our terms. I maintain 51% ownership. That's non-negotiable." The lead investor, a silver-haired man whose firm had backed some of the decade's most successful startups, leaned forward. "That's unusual for a Series A round. Most founders accept dilution as the cost of capital." "Most founders aren't me." Imani smiled pleasantly, but her eyes remained firm. "Obsidian's vision requires consistent leadership. I've built this company while raising 3 children and completing law school. I didn't do all that to hand over control at the first opportunity." After a tense negotiation, they reached an agreement. $20 million in funding for 30% equity, with Imani retaining clear majority control. The capital would fuel Obsidian's next phase of growth while preserving the company's unique culture and mission. The investment proved timely when, just weeks later, the world changed overnight. As the COVID-19 pandemic forced businesses into remote operations, demand for secure digital systems exploded. Companies that had delayed cybersecurity upgrades suddenly faced urgent vulnerabilities with employees working from home networks. "We need to pivot. Now." Imani addressed her team via emergency video conference. 50 faces populated her screen. Obsidian had grown rapidly in the months since the Forbes feature. "Every client will need enhanced remote security protocols. I want solutions ready by the end of the week." Within 72 hours, Imani had converted Obsidian to entirely remote operations and developed a comprehensive security package for businesses struggling with the transition. While competitors scrambled to adapt, Obsidian was already deploying solutions. At home, Imani converted their dining room into Command Central, multiple monitors displaying project timelines and client systems. The triplets, now 8 years old, adapted to online learning with remarkable ease, often providing technical support to their overwhelmed teachers. "Mr. Peterson, you need to enable participants to share screens," Martin explained patiently to his third-grade teacher during a class Zoom call. "Click the security button at the bottom." "Thank you, Martin," the teacher replied, amazed at the child's technological fluency. During an international security conference held virtually, Martin further demonstrated his extraordinary abilities. As Imani participated in a panel discussion, technical difficulties arose with a Japanese participant whose translator had lost connection. "I can translate, Mama," Martin offered during the break, sitting beside her at the dining table. The conference organizers, initially skeptical, were astonished as the 8-year-old accurately translated complex technical concepts between English and Japanese, enabling the discussion to continue seamlessly. The pandemic that devastated many businesses became an accelerant for Obsidian. By the summer of 2020, the company had tripled its client base and doubled its workforce, all operating remotely with Imani's innovative management approach. The first major crisis under this new paradigm came when Atlantic National Bank, one of Obsidian's largest clients, detected an active security breach. Imani coordinated the response from her dining room, directing teams across 3 time zones while simultaneously supervising the triplets' online learning in the next room. "Malcolm, help your brothers with their assignment. I need 30 minutes uninterrupted," she called, before turning back to her emergency response team. "Isolate the compromised servers and implement Protocol Kestrel. I want hourly updates." After 48 intense hours, Obsidian not only contained the breach but implemented enhanced protections that prevented similar vulnerabilities across all their client systems. The successful resolution caught the attention of federal agencies struggling with their own security challenges in the remote work environment. "Ms. Jackson, this is Director Williams from the Department of Financial Services. We'd like to discuss security consulting for several critical departments. By autumn, Obsidian had secured contracts with 3 government agencies, establishing the company as a trusted security partner for both private and public sectors, an extraordinary achievement for a firm not yet 5 years old. The Triplets continued to flourish despite the pandemic's challenges. Their academic performance placed them among the top students at Lakeside, with each boy developing his unique strengths. Malcolm's mathematical abilities approached prodigy level. Martin now spoke 4 languages fluently, and Marcus had begun designing simple robotics projects that impressed even Obsidian's senior engineers. On a snowy December evening, as Imani reviewed quarterly projections, her intercom buzzed. "Ms. Jackson, executives from Megatech are requesting a virtual meeting, tomorrow if possible." Megatech, a technology conglomerate valued at over $100 billion, had been watching Obsidian's rise with interest. The next day, their acquisition team made their intention clear. $500 million, stated their lead negotiator without preamble. "You've built something impressive, Ms. Jackson. We want to integrate Obsidian's security protocols into the Megatech ecosystem." Imani listened carefully to their presentation, asking pointed questions about how Obsidian would be positioned within their corporate structure, what would happen to her team, and how the company's culture would be preserved. "Your offer is generous," she acknowledged when they finished. "But Obsidian isn't for sale. We're just getting started." The executives looked genuinely surprised. Few entrepreneurs turn down $500 million acquisitions. "Perhaps you should take time to consider. This opportunity may not come again." "I don't need time," Imani replied confidently. "Obsidian's independent vision is non-negotiable, but we're open to partnership discussions if you're interested in licensing our technology." That evening, Imani celebrated the triplets' 8th birthday with a simple party at home, chocolate cake, modest gifts, and a video call with Gloria, who had temporarily relocated to Michigan during the pandemic to care for an ailing sister. The contrast between the day's events, refusing $500 million in the morning, blowing out birthday candles with her sons in the evening, struck Imani as surreal yet perfectly aligned with her values. Success meant nothing if it didn't serve the family she had fought so hard to raise. As she tucked the boys into bed, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Jackson, I'm Catherine Winters from Technology Today. We're compiling our annual list of the 50 most influential women in technology, and your name keeps coming up in our research." The magazine that Nathan Reynolds kept on his desk now contained the profile of the woman he had rejected, and as his own company faced mounting challenges, he couldn't imagine that their paths would cross again at the industry's most important event of the year. The magazine cover, featuring Imani Jackson as one of 50 most influential women in technology, created ripples throughout the industry. What had begun as a small profile in Forbes had evolved into consistent media attention as Obsidian Security Solutions continued its remarkable ascent. By early 2022, the once struggling startup occupied 3 full floors of the same building where Imani had rented her first tiny office. The company logo, a polished black stone emblem, now adorned the entrance lobby. In the executive boardroom, Imani reviewed the terms of the latest investment round with her leadership team. The numbers on the document before her seemed almost unreal. $300 million for a 10% stake, valuing Obsidian at $3 billion. "If we accept these terms, we maintain controlling interest while gaining the capital needed for international expansion," she explained, her voice steady despite the momentous nature of the discussion. "Any questions before we vote?" Around the table, her assembled executives, diverse in age, gender, and background, exchanged glances before unanimously raising their hands in approval. Charles Bennett, the CFO who had once questioned her hiring practices, now nodded with undisguised respect. "Then it's settled," Imani concluded, signing the final document with a Montblanc pen, a gift from her team on Obsidian's 5th anniversary. "As of today, we're officially a unicorn." Later that evening, alone in her office with its panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, Imani allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She opened her desk drawer and removed the framed torn check, $10,000 that Nathan Reynolds had offered to resolve the problem of her pregnancy. Beside it lay a printout of Obsidian's current valuation. Officially a billionaire, she whispered to herself. From housekeeper to billionaire in less than 10 years. The journey had been extraordinary by any standard. Obsidian now protected the digital infrastructure of 6 government agencies and over 200 global corporations. The company's proprietary security protocols had become industry standards, mentioned in the same breath as giants like Cisco and Microsoft. 2 weeks later, Imani's assistant placed a magazine on her desk, Time's latest issue featuring Imani on the cover under the headline, "The Transformative Force: How Imani Jackson Revolutionized Digital Security and Corporate Culture." The profile detailed her journey from single mother to tech mogul, though Imani had carefully omitted any mention of the triplets' father. The boys, now 9 years old, had developed into remarkable young men, each displaying exceptional talents that were beginning to attract attention beyond their immediate circle. At the Midwest Technology Conference that spring, Malcolm, Martin, and Marcus presented their educational application designed to simplify complex concepts for disadvantaged children. The auditorium fell silent as the 3 identical boys, dressed in matching blazers but distinguished by their colored pocket squares, demonstrated the program they had coded themselves. "We noticed that many educational apps assume prior knowledge," Malcolm explained to the audience of technology professionals. "We've simplified programming concepts so 7-year-olds can understand basic coding logic regardless of their background." Martin continued seamlessly, "The app automatically translates into 12 languages, detecting the user's preferred language settings." "And it works offline," Marcus added, "because many children in underserved communities don't have reliable internet access." The thunderous applause that followed their presentation confirmed what Imani already knew. Her sons were exceptional not just in intelligence but in empathy and vision. They had insisted that all profits from the app go to schools in disadvantaged areas, establishing a foundation for this purpose with Imani's guidance. With Obsidian's explosive growth came changes in their personal circumstances as well. After careful consideration, Imani purchased a penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, spacious, filled with natural light, and providing the security and comfort her family deserved. "What do you think?" she asked the boys as they explored the space for the first time, their eyes wide at the panoramic views of the lake. "It's amazing," breathed Marcus, pressing his palms against the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Can we still have our bunk beds?" Martin asked practically, making Imani smile. "You each have your own room now," she explained, "but we can certainly get bunk beds if you prefer." Malcolm walked the perimeter of the living room, calculating. "The square footage is approximately 3,245 square feet. That's 7.6 times larger than our first apartment." Imani hugged him, always the mathematician. With their improved circumstances, Imani made another significant change, officially hiring her mother as family manager with a generous salary and benefits package. "You don't need to do this," Gloria protested when Imani presented her with the employment contract. "I'm your mother, not your employee." "You gave up everything to help us," Imani replied firmly. "Your retirement, your home in Michigan, your independence. You deserve security and recognition for that sacrifice. Please, Mom, let me do this for you." Gloria relented, accepting not just the position but the implicit acknowledgement of her essential role in Obsidian's success story. Without her support during those early years, none of what followed would have been possible. As Obsidian expanded globally, opening offices in New York, San Francisco, and London, Imani implemented her most ambitious initiative yet, the Obsidian Scholarship Program, providing full educational funding and paid internships to students from underserved communities like Englewood, where she had struggled to raise the triplets. "I want to interview these candidates personally," she instructed her HR director. "Their grades aren't as important as their determination and creativity." The contrast between her current reality and her humble beginnings became starkly apparent one afternoon when she visited her old elementary school in her chauffeur-driven Bentley. Children swarmed the vehicle in excitement as she emerged, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, to deliver donated computers and establish a coding lab. "You used to go here?" one wide-eyed girl asked, clearly finding it difficult to connect the elegant woman before her with the aging school building. "I did," Imani confirmed, kneeling to meet the child's eyes despite her expensive outfit. "And if I can go from this classroom to where I am now, imagine where you might go." In industry circles, rumors began circulating about troubles at Reynolds Technologies. Nathan's company, once considered innovative, had struggled to maintain relevance in the rapidly evolving tech landscape. Several key contracts had been lost to more agile competitors, including Obsidian, and their stock had dropped 20% over 2 quarters. Imani took no public satisfaction in these developments, maintaining professional courtesy whenever Reynolds Tech was mentioned. Privately, however, she recognized the poetic justice. The company led by the man who had deemed her insufficient was now losing ground to the empire she had built while raising the children he had rejected. In June, an unexpected email arrived from the organizers of the National Technology Conference, the industry's most prestigious annual gathering. "We would be honored to have you deliver the keynote address at this year's event," it read. "Your journey and vision represent the future of technology leadership." Imani shared the news with the triplets over dinner that evening. "It's in New York next month. Would you like to come? We could make a family trip of it." "Can we go, Mom? We want to see you shine," Marcus exclaimed, always the most expressive of the three. "Of course," she agreed, smiling at their enthusiasm. "We'll make it special." Later that evening, reviewing the conference program sent by the organizers, Imani paused at a familiar name. Nathan Reynolds would be receiving the Legacy Innovation Award and delivering a presentation immediately before her keynote. After 10 years of complete separation, their paths would intersect on the industry's biggest stage. She felt no fear at the prospect, only a calm certainty that she was more than prepared for this encounter. The woman who would stand on that stage bore little resemblance to the law student he had dismissed a decade ago. In the weeks leading up to the conference, Imani carefully selected her wardrobe for the event, including a custom Armani suit with an obsidian brooch at the lapel, subtle but unmistakable branding. Her stylist, personal shopper, and assistant coordinated every detail, ensuring her appearance would project exactly the power and confidence she had earned. As they boarded the private jet to New York, the triplets buzzed with excitement about their first trip in first class. Settling into her leather seat, Imani reviewed her keynote speech, unaware that Nathan Reynolds was doing the same on his own jet, both oblivious that their paths would not merely cross but spectacularly collide before the eyes of America's technological elite. The private jet sliced through clouds as the Manhattan skyline emerged in the distance. Imani closed her keynote speech notes, satisfied with the final revisions. Her eyes shifted to the triplets across the aisle, their identical faces illuminated by the tablets they were using to review their father's company website. "Reynolds Technologies seems to be struggling with innovation," Malcolm observed, scrolling through their quarterly reports. "Their stock dropped another 8% last week." Imani smiled gently. "We're not attending the conference to analyze competitors, sweetheart." "Technically, he's not just a competitor," Martin replied softly, always the most emotionally perceptive of the three. "He's also a man who made his choices long ago," Imani finished firmly. "Remember what we discussed. This trip is about Obsidian's achievement, not personal history." The Plaza Hotel's magnificent facade gleamed in the afternoon sunlight as their limousine pulled to a stop at the entrance. Flashbulbs popped immediately. Imani Jackson's arrival had been anticipated by technology and business press alike. She emerged first, a vision in a tailored midnight blue pantsuit, her obsidian brooch catching the light. The triplets followed, immaculate in identical black suits distinguished only by their colored pocket squares. blue for Malcolm, green for Martin, red for Marcus. "Ms. Jackson, over here!" Photographers called as the family paused briefly on the red carpet. The boys, accustomed to increasing public attention, stood tall beside their mother, their posture reflecting years of her gentle reminders. Heads high, shoulders back, "You are Jacksons." In the hotel's opulent lobby, Imani was immediately approached by the conference coordinator, a harried woman with an earpiece and tablet. "Ms. Jackson, we're so honored to have you. I need to update you on a programming change." She swiped through her schedule. "Your keynote will now directly follow Mr. Reynolds' Legacy Innovation Acceptance speech." Imani's expression remained neutral despite the deliberate scheduling. "I see. Thank you for informing me." As they proceeded toward the elevator, Imani caught sight of a familiar figure across the lobby. Nathan Reynolds stood surrounded by executives, gesturing as he spoke. 10 years had added subtle lines around his eyes and silver threads at his temples, but he remained unmistakably the man who had once told her she would never be enough. "Is that him?" whispered Marcus, following her momentary gaze. Imani gently guided her sons toward the elevator. "Yes, we'll likely see him at the conference tomorrow." The presidential suite on the 30th floor offered breathtaking views of Central Park. While the boys explored the luxurious space with exclamations of delight, Imani stood at the window, mentally preparing for tomorrow's inevitable encounter. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity, her stylist ensuring every hair was perfect, her assistant confirming final schedule details. The triplets, dressed in their formal attire, serious about their role as representatives of Obsidian. The grand ballroom of the plaza was transformed for the conference, with stadium seating facing a central stage adorned with screens displaying the event's theme, "Shaping Tomorrow's Technology Today." Imani and the triplets were escorted to reserved front-row seats as the conference director welcomed the audience. From her prime position, Imani observed Nathan taking his seat in the speaker preparation area. He appeared confident but tense, periodically checking his phone and adjusting his tie. The restless gestures revealed pressure beneath the polished exterior. When his name was announced, Nathan strode to the podium with practiced ease. "Thank you for this tremendous honor," he began, his voice echoing through the sound system. "Reynolds Technologies has always believed in the power of legacy innovation." As he spoke about overcoming market challenges and adapting to changing landscapes, Imani noted the careful wording that transformed recent struggles into strategic pivots. She recognized the technique. She had studied corporate communication extensively, but his delivery lacked conviction. Beside her, Martin leaned close. "He seems nervous when he talks about innovation," he whispered, confirming her own observation. Nathan's presentation concluded with moderate applause. The conference director returned to the stage. "And now, to present our Innovator of the Year award and deliver our keynote address, please welcome Imani Jackson, CEO of Obsidian Security Solutions." Imani squeezed each boy's hand before rising gracefully. Backstage, she passed Nathan in the narrow corridor. Their eyes met briefly, his widening in recognition despite having surely seen her name on the program. "Imani," he said, clearly attempting casual professionalism. "It's been a decade," she finished politely, continuing toward the stage entrance. "Congratulations on your award." On stage, Nathan performed his introduction duties mechanically, reading her accomplishments from the teleprompter. Then he turned, extending the crystal award as she approached. In that moment, his gaze shifted beyond her to the front row, where 3 identical boys sat watching intently. The recognition was instantaneous, a physical shock that registered across his features. The award slipped from his fingers, crashing against the microphone with an ear-splitting feedback screech that echoed through the ballroom. Imani smoothly retrieved the award while Nathan stood frozen, his complexion alternating between ghostly pale and flushed red. His lips moved, forming words only she could hear. Are they mine?" She met his gaze steadily, her voice low enough to avoid the microphones. No, they are mine, exclusively mine. Turning to the audience with perfect composure, Imani delivered her keynote address, a brilliant analysis of security challenges in an interconnected world. Her confident presence commanded attention, while Nathan retreated to the back of the stage, visibly shaken. In conclusion, she stated as her presentation reached its final minutes, "True security comes not from isolation, but from building resilient systems that adapt to challenges rather than breaking under pressure. That's why I dedicate this award to my sons, Malcolm, Martin, and Marcus, who taught me that our greatest security comes not from algorithms, but from unconditional love." The standing ovation was immediate and enthusiastic. As Imani returned to her seat, the triplets applauded proudly, unaware of the seismic shift that had occurred on stage. Nathan had already disappeared. During the luncheon that followed, Imani maintained her focus on networking with industry colleagues. The triplets, poised beyond their years, engaged impressively with executives who expressed astonishment at their knowledge and articulation. "Your sons are remarkable," commented the CTO of a major financial institution. "True prodigies." "They've had advantages I didn't," Imani replied simply, "including knowing they are valued unconditionally." As dessert was being served, Imani noticed Nathan approaching their table, accompanied by a slender blonde woman whose tight smile didn't reach her calculating eyes. Catherine Sinclair Reynolds, daughter of Senator Robert Sinclair and Nathan's wife of nearly 10 years. "Imani," Nathan began, his voice forcefully casual. "What a wonderful surprise. I had no idea you would be here." "Mr. Reynolds," she replied formally, maintaining professional distance. "Congratulations on your award." Catherine's gaze darted between them, instantly sensing the undercurrent. "You know each other?" "We attended the same university," Imani explained smoothly, offering nothing more. The triplets observed the interaction with keen interest. Malcolm, always the most perceptive, studied Nathan's face with analytical precision, clearly noting the similarities no one was acknowledging. "These are your sons?" Nathan asked, his voice betraying nervous tension despite his attempt at casual inquiry. "They're impressive." "Yes, they are," Imani confirmed, pride evident in her tone. "Malcolm is our mathematics prodigy. He developed an encryption algorithm we now use in our core software. Martin speaks Mandarin, Arabic, French, and Russian fluently at 10 years old. And Marcus recently won the National Science Award for his water filtration system for underserved regions." Nathan swallowed visibly, clearly calculating dates in his head. "They seem extraordinary." "They are," Imani affirmed. "Boys, this is Mr. Reynolds, a colleague from the technology sector." All three boys extended their hands simultaneously, looking directly into Nathan's eyes with the same intensity he recognized from his own reflection. "Your company is developing the new security system for the Federal Reserve, correct?" Malcolm inquired politely. "I read about vulnerabilities in the Reynolds Protocol in the Journal of Cybersecurity last month. Fascinating problem." "The vulnerabilities?" Nathan stammered. "Yes, we published a theoretical paper on it last month," Malcolm continued casually. "Mom said we should share knowledge to improve security for everyone. The MIT professor who co-signed with us said we were the youngest contributors in the publication's history." Catherine tugged at Nathan's arm, clearly uncomfortable. "Darling, we should greet the Harringtons before they leave." But Nathan seemed unable to move, transfixed by the three faces that could have been his sons, that were biologically his sons, but in every other respect, complete strangers to him. "Perhaps we could talk privately," he suggested to Imani, his voice low. "I'm not sure what we would have to discuss after 10 years, Imani replied, her tone calm but firm. "My sons and I have an early flight to Chicago tomorrow." "Your sons?" Nathan murmured, quiet enough that only Imani could hear. "They're mine too." Imani looked directly into his eyes. "You made it very clear they would be my burden, not yours. Your exact words, if memory serves. And I've never been one to waste words or time on settled matters. A photographer from the Wall Street Journal approached their table. What an incredible moment! The CEOs of the two most innovative technology companies. May I take a photo? Before they could respond, Malcolm spoke up. Our mother should be photographed with her sons. We are Obsidian's future, after all. Of course, the photographer agreed. Mr. Reynolds, would you join Ms. Jackson and her sons? A historic photo. The flash captured the image that would appear on the business section's cover the next day. Nathan Reynolds, face tense and pale, beside radiant Imani Jackson, surrounded by three identical boys whose faces revealed an undeniable resemblance to the man beside them. When the photo was taken, Marcus looked at Nathan and asked innocently, "Are you all right, Mr. Reynolds? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Are you all right, Mr. Reynolds? You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus's innocent question hung in the air as the photographer moved away, leaving behind a wake of uncomfortable silence. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel buzzed with conversation around them, but at their table, time seemed suspended. Nathan's complexion had shifted from ashen to flushed, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of an empty chair for support. Catherine's eyes narrowed, darting between her husband and the three boys. "Nathan," she said, her socialite smile fixed firmly in place though her voice had acquired a brittle edge, "we should circulate." "In a moment," he replied absently, still staring at the triplets with undisguised fascination. "Imani, I had no idea. They're remarkable." "Thank you," Imani replied evenly, straightening Malcolm's tie with practiced ease. "We should prepare for the evening panel. Boys, finish your dessert, please." "Actually," Nathan persisted, pulling out the empty chair and sitting uninvited at their table, "I'd love to hear more about your work, Malcolm. The encryption algorithm you mentioned, it sounds revolutionary." Catherine remained standing, her discomfort increasingly evident. "I'll go speak with the Harringtons," she announced to no one in particular before walking away with measured steps. Malcolm, always analytical, studied Nathan's face with open curiosity. "Our modification to the standard RSA protocol increases processing efficiency by 27% while maintaining security integrity. We published the paper in the International Journal of Cryptography last month." "We?" Nathan echoed. "My brothers and I," Malcolm clarified, "though I did the mathematical proofs." "I translated the paper into Mandarin and Arabic," Martin added. "Research should be accessible globally." "And I designed the visual models," Marcus contributed. "Complex concepts need clear visualization." Nathan leaned forward, captivated. "At 10 years old? That's extraordinary. Your mother must be—" "A brilliant teacher and mentor," Malcolm finished, glancing at Imani with evident admiration. Imani sipped her water, maintaining composed dignity despite the surreal nature of the interaction. 10 years of imagining this moment hadn't prepared her for the reality. Nathan, looking at her sons with hunger in his eyes, suddenly interested in what he had once dismissed as a burden. "Have you always been interested in mathematics, Malcolm?" Nathan asked, his tone almost desperate in its eagerness. "Since I was 3, Malcolm replied. "Mom gave me logic puzzles to keep me occupied while she studied for law exams." Nathan flinched almost imperceptibly at the reminder of when the boys were 3, when he was celebrating his 2nd anniversary with Catherine, completely disconnected from their existence. A waiter approached, refilling water glasses and clearing dessert plates. During this momentary interruption, Imani caught Catherine watching them from across the room, her expression unreadable but intense. "The gala dinner begins in an hour," Imani noted, checking her watch. "Boys, we should return to our suite to prepare." "Of course," Nathan said quickly. "But perhaps we could continue this conversation later? I'd be fascinated to hear more about your educational experiences." The triplets looked to their mother, awaiting her guidance. Imani hesitated only briefly. "We have a full schedule, Mr. Reynolds. The boys are participating in the Young Innovators panel tomorrow morning. You're presenting at the conference? Nathan asked, addressing the boys directly. Our educational app for disadvantaged communities, Marcus explained. It provides free coding instruction in 12 languages. The profits support technology access in underserved schools, Martin added. All of them, Malcolm concluded. Every penny. Nathan's expression shifted, something like shame briefly crossing his features. That's incredibly generous. Our mother taught us that true success includes lifting others, Malcolm stated with the certainty of a deeply ingrained principle. As they stood to leave, Nathan rose quickly. Imani, please, just 15 minutes. There's a small reception room just off the main hall. Imani considered him coolly. The boys and I come as a package, Mr. Reynolds. Anything you wish to discuss can be said to all of us. Of course, he agreed immediately, too quickly. I just thought, professional courtesy. The reception room, though small, featured the same opulence as the rest of the plaza. Crystal chandeliers illuminated gold-accented walls while plush armchairs formed an intimate conversation circle. The triplets seated themselves with perfect posture, observing Nathan with undisguised curiosity. You have the same eyes, Martin noted suddenly. Similar nose structure, too. Nathan's head jerked up in surprise. Yes, I suppose there is a resemblance. Genetic inheritance patterns are fascinating, Malcolm commented. Dominant traits express themselves regardless of other genetic contributions. Nathan cleared his throat nervously. You're remarkably advanced in your understanding of, well, everything. Our mother ensured we had access to knowledge without artificial limitations, Marcus explained. Age doesn't determine capacity for understanding. Nathan's gaze shifted to Imani, who stood slightly apart, watching the interaction with careful neutrality. You've done an extraordinary job with them. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been. You didn't try to imagine it, Imani replied, her voice level but carrying unmistakable weight. That was your choice. The triplets exchanged glances, their identical expressions revealing they understood more than they had explicitly been told. Are you our biological father? Malcolm asked directly, his analytical mind clearly having assembled the available evidence. The room fell silent. Nathan's mouth opened and closed before he finally whispered, Yes. Martin's eyes narrowed slightly. Yet you've never contacted us, never sent birthday cards or inquired about our well-being. It's complicated, Nathan stammered. There were circumstances. Did you know about us? Marcus interrupted, his usually cheerful expression serious. Nathan glanced at Imani, who made no move to rescue him from his own truth. I knew your mother was expecting. We weren't. It wasn't the right time. Time is relative, Malcolm observed coldly. It's been 10 years, 3 months, and approximately 17 days since we were born. That seems like adequate time to send a single message inquiring about our existence. The door opened suddenly and Catherine entered, her composure visibly strained. Nathan, the Sinclairs have arrived. Your presence is expected. Her gaze swept over the triplets, lingering on their features with new understanding. Catherine, Nathan began awkwardly, I know exactly who this is, she interrupted, her voice tight. What I don't know is why you're having a private meeting with them. Professional courtesy, Imani supplied smoothly, repeating Nathan's earlier excuse. Mr. Reynolds was interested in our Young Innovators program. Catherine's eyes narrowed. How convenient that these young innovators happen to be the spitting image of my husband at that age. A remarkable coincidence. Nathan paled. Catherine, we should discuss this privately. Yes, we certainly should, she agreed with brittle politeness. Along with discussing why our daughter's photograph is conspicuously absent from your office while you're apparently fascinated with someone else's children. Martin looked between them with perceptive eyes. You have a daughter? Elizabeth, Catherine answered before Nathan could speak. She's 7. You have a half-sister you've never met because your father," she nearly spat the word, "has apparently been leading separate lives." "Catherine, please," Nathan implored. "Not here." "Why not here?" she challenged. "Seems you've made all your important decisions without consulting me anyway." "Actually," Imani interrupted calmly, "the boys and I have a schedule to maintain. We'll leave you to your discussion." "Wait," Nathan protested desperately. "I want to know them. I want to be part of their lives." Catherine laughed bitterly. "Suddenly interested in fatherhood when it comes packaged with brilliant, accomplished children? How convenient." "It's not like that," Nathan insisted, though his expression betrayed uncertainty. Malcolm stood, straightening his blazer with dignity beyond his years. "Mr. Reynolds, if you're interested in knowing us, perhaps begin by being honest with yourself about why, after 10 years of complete absence, you suddenly find us worthy of your attention." Nathan flinched as if struck. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted. "I was young, scared." "Our mother was young too," Martin observed. "Younger than you. She was scared too. The difference is, she took responsibility." "I want to make it right," Nathan pleaded, looking between the boys and Imani. "I can help financially, educationally." "We're on full academic scholarships at Lakeside Academy," Marcus informed him, "and our mother's company is valued at $3.2 billion. I don't think we need financial assistance." Catherine's eyebrows rose at this information, her gaze reassessing Imani with new calculation. "By the way," Malcolm added with calm precision, "my mother is pregnant with our second child. The stress of this situation wouldn't be good for her." Catherine's face drained of color. "You're pregnant?" "No," Imani clarified immediately. "I'm not." Malcolm looked directly at Nathan. "But you said earlier today that your wife is pregnant with your second child, that the stress wouldn't be good for her, so we should keep this meeting discreet." He tilted his head slightly. Was that not accurate? While the photographer's flash immortalized the stunned expressions around the table, Imani realized the confrontation she had anticipated for a decade was unfolding in ways she could never have scripted, orchestrated not by her long-imagined retribution, but by the brilliant, perceptive sons who were her true vindication. The silence in the reception room crystallized around Malcolm's words. Catherine's face, already pale, now drained of its remaining color as she turned toward her husband. "You told them I'm pregnant?" Her voice trembled. "Before telling our families? Before we even confirmed with the doctor?" Nathan's mouth opened and closed, finding no escape route from the truth his son had unwittingly exposed. "Catherine, I can explain—" "You've explained enough," she interrupted, gathering her composure with visible effort. "Apparently, you discuss our private matters with strangers while keeping their existence secret from me for a decade." She turned to Imani with surprising dignity. "Congratulations on your award, Ms. Jackson. Your sons are extraordinary." With that, Catherine Sinclair Reynolds exited the room, her Louboutin heels clicking purposefully across the marble floor. Nathan collapsed into the nearest chair, his perfectly tailored tuxedo suddenly appearing too large for his frame. "This isn't how I imagined this would go," he murmured. "How did you imagine it?" Imani asked, genuinely curious. "A joyful reunion? Gratitude that you've finally acknowledged their existence?" Before he could answer, Malcolm spoke. "The photograph taken earlier will likely appear in tomorrow's business publications. Based on our physical resemblance to you, people will draw conclusions. The mathematical probability of 3 unrelated children bearing such striking similarity to you is approximately 1 in 7 billion, Martin added clinically. "Plus, your reaction was pretty obvious," Marcus concluded. "You looked like you might pass out when you saw us." Nathan ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, disrupting its perfection. "What happens now?" Imani checked her watch. "Now, we attend the gala dinner as scheduled. My sons and I have an early flight tomorrow. You should probably find your wife." "That's it?" Nathan asked incredulously. 10 years and we just walk away?" "That was your choice," Imani reminded him. 10 years ago and every day since. As they left the reception room, the triplets walked ahead, conversing quietly among themselves. Nathan caught Imani's arm gently. "Please," he whispered, "I need to talk to you, to explain." "We have nothing to discuss," she replied, removing her arm from his grasp. "I'll be at your suite at 8 tomorrow morning," he insisted. "Before your flight." Imani met his gaze steadily. "That's your choice, but I suggest you focus on saving your marriage first." The following morning dawned clear and bright over Manhattan, sunlight streaming through the presidential suite's windows. Imani had been awake since 5, reviewing news alerts on her phone. As predicted, the photograph had already gone viral in technology and business circles. While no publication made explicit accusations, the side-by-side image of Nathan with 3 boys who looked remarkably like him prompted speculation. "Mom?" Malcolm's voice came from the doorway of her bedroom. Martin and Marcus stood beside him, already dressed for travel. "We need to talk about Mr. Reynolds." Imani patted the bed beside her. "Come sit." As the boys arranged themselves around her, she took a deep breath. "I've never lied to you about your father, but I haven't told you everything either. I wanted to protect you from feeling rejected." "He rejected us before we were born," Malcolm stated with his characteristic directness. "When you told him you were pregnant." "Yes," Imani confirmed. "He made it very clear that you would be, in his words, my burden, not his." "Did you try to contact him after we were born?" Martin asked. "I did once," Imani admitted, "when you were 2 months old. He had his lawyer send a cease and desist letter threatening legal action if I persisted." The boys processed this information silently. "Why didn't you tell us the whole truth?" Marcus finally asked. "Because his rejection was about him, not you," Imani explained gently. "I didn't want you to ever question your worth because of his choices." A knock at the suite door interrupted their conversation. Imani glanced at the clock. 8 exactly. "That's probably him," she said. "You don't have to see him if you don't want to." "We want to," all 3 responded simultaneously. When Imani opened the door, Nathan stood alone in the hallway. His designer suit was wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed from apparent sleeplessness. Gone was the polished CEO from yesterday's conference. In his place stood a man confronting the consequences of his choices. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Imani stepped aside, leading him to the suite's sitting area where the triplets waited, seated together on a sofa with perfect posture. "Did your wife return to your room last night?" Martin asked immediately, his emotional intelligence detecting the answer in Nathan's disheveled appearance. "No," Nathan admitted. "She took a late flight back to Chicago." "I'm sorry," Martin said, surprising everyone with his genuine sympathy. Nathan sank into an armchair across from the boys. "I've spent the night thinking about everything, about the choices I made 10 years ago." He looked directly at Imani. "I was wrong. Terribly, unforgivably wrong." "Why come forward now?" Malcolm asked, getting straight to the heart of the matter. "You've known about us for 10 years. Nathan sighed heavily. "The honest answer isn't flattering. When I saw you yesterday, how brilliant, articulate, and accomplished you are, I realized what I'd thrown away. I want to be part of your lives now. So if we were struggling in school or had developmental challenges, you wouldn't be here," Malcolm pressed. Nathan flinched. I don't know. Probably not," he admitted reluctantly. "I've never been good at handling challenges. Unlike our mother," Marcus observed, "who handled the challenge of raising 3 children alone while building a billion-dollar company." "I know I don't deserve a place in your lives," Nathan said quietly, "but I'd like the chance to earn one." Imani, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "What exactly are you proposing, Nathan? Secret weekend visits? Clandestine relationships while you maintain your public image with Catherine and Elizabeth?" "I'll tell Catherine everything," he promised. "I'll acknowledge the boys publicly." "And how will that affect your daughter?" Imani challenged. Elizabeth deserves better than to learn she has 3 half-brothers through media speculation. Nathan had no immediate response. Malcolm stood, his brothers following suit. "Mr. Reynolds, we appreciate your honesty today, but we've had a mother who has given us everything: love, security, education, values. We don't need a father who only wants us when we're successful." "But I could help with connections, opportunities," Nathan began desperately. "Mom is CEO of a company worth $3.2 billion, Malcolm reminded him calmly. "The Reynolds Technologies market cap fell to $2.1 billion last quarter. Your financial assistance seems unnecessary." Nathan's face reddened at the precision of his son's financial knowledge. "It's not just about money." "Then what is it about?" Martin asked quietly. "Because it seems like you're only interested in claiming successful children, not in the actual work of parenting." A hotel staff member knocked, informing them their car was waiting to take them to the airport. As the triplets gathered their belongings, Nathan made one final plea. "Please give me a chance. I want to make things right." "Why now?" Imani asked again. "After 10 years, why suddenly want to be a father?" "Because look at them," Nathan exclaimed, gesturing toward the boys. "They're brilliant, talented, extraordinary." "Ah," Imani nodded slowly. "So if they were ordinary children with average grades and no special talents, you wouldn't be here?" Nathan's hesitation revealed the truth without words. "As I suspected," Imani concluded. "You don't want to be a father. You want to be associated with their success. There's a fundamental difference." "Will we see you again?" Marcus asked suddenly. Nathan's expression brightened. "I'd like that very much." "Then be honest with your wife and daughter first," Marcus advised. "If you want to know us someday, start by knowing yourself, and perhaps begin by being honest with your wife and daughter about who you really are." In the limousine heading to LaGuardia Airport, Martin asked, "Are we okay, Mom?" Imani embraced all 3 boys. "We're more than okay. We're the Jacksons, strong, intelligent, and complete." From the taxi window, Imani caught a glimpse of Nathan exiting the hotel, somehow diminished by the magnitude of his past choices. For a moment, she felt not pity, but a strange gratitude. His abandonment had forged in her a strength she might never have discovered otherwise. At LaGuardia, while waiting to board, Malcolm asked, "Do you think he'll try to contact us again?" "Probably," Imani answered honestly. "People like Nathan always want what they can't have. But the question isn't whether he'll try to enter our lives. The question is whether we'll choose to let him in, and that choice will always be ours." Their flight to Chicago was announced. As they walked toward the boarding gate, Imani and her sons moved forward not as survivors of abandonment, but as victors who had transformed rejection into triumph and absence into strength. Behind them, the shadow of the past diminished, while ahead, the future they had built together shone with infinite promise. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.